This prison had an incredibly strange incident. During roll call, prisoner number 245 never appeared. The angry guard walked over to check. He yelled, "You better be sick or dead." But 2 seconds later, he was utterly stunned. A murderer had suddenly disappeared from a heavily guarded cell. Warden Norton heard the news and came to inspect. In his anger, he casually picked up a rock and threw it, but unexpectedly punctured a hole in the poster on the wall. After the poster was peeled down, everyone understood clearly. It turned out that prisoner had escaped. The prison immediately dispatched numerous police to investigate, but in the end, they only found an old, tattered prison uniform and a rock hammer about to fall apart in a nearby ditch. And this is the world-famous Shawshank escape event. It all started 20 years ago. In 1947, Shawshank Prison welcomed a new batch of prisoners. The old prisoners were extremely excited because they were about to get new toys again. As usual, they would bet on which prisoner would wet himself first. Most people chose the fat guy, but Red chose his own path, insisting on picking the tall, skinny Andy from the crowd. "I bet 10 cigarettes. Afterwards, Warden Norton began to speak, but was suddenly interrupted by a tough-looking, blind-eyed guy. He asked when they would eat. Seeing this, Captain Hadley picked up his baton and stepped forward. "When we tell you to eat, you eat. When we tell you to shit, you shit. When we tell you to piss, you piss." Warden Norton continued his speech and then said, "Entrust your thoughts to God and your sorry ass to him. Welcome to Shawshank Prison." After the heavy prison door slammed shut, the first sleepless night at Shawshank began. The guards had just left when some old-timers eagerly started teasing the newcomers. Instantly, a new prisoner started crying, wanting to go home. Someone had won the bet. The fat guy scored first. Soon enough, the noise from the cell attracted the guards' attention. Captain Hadley warned the fat guy to shut up, but he kept crying his heart out. But the more he was warned, the louder the fat guy cried. The captain lost patience, pushed the fat guy outside and beat him brutally, stopping only when he was on the verge of death. "Take this cripple to the infirmary." Seeing his plump body, the guards hesitated for a moment, then left. Thus, the next morning, everyone heard the news that the fat guy had died. Hadley smashed his head in. The poor bastard just lay there until morning. While everyone was silent, Andy suddenly asked, "What was his name?" "What's it to you, new fish? Why does a dead man need a name?" Also from that day on, Red became curious about the young man who had cost him 2 packs of cigarettes. After listening around for a while, he finally found out. It turned out Andy used to be a banker, but he was accidentally implicated in a murder case. That night, Andy got drunk wanting to kill his wife and her lover, but before he could act, both were found tragically murdered in the house. But after going to court, all the evidence pointed directly at the innocent Andy, leaving him no way to deny it. In the end, even the judge was deceived. "I sentence you to 2 life sentences in retribution for the 2 dead victims." End of trial. At first, Andy didn't interact with anyone, until a month later when he approached Red. He hoped Red could get him a rock hammer for carving. Helping him was the man who knew how to get things in prison. Of course, Red could do it, but he was still slightly wary of this specific item. "You want to escape? Dig a tunnel. You'll understand when you see the hammer." As expected, after Red got the hammer, all his worries were dismissed. Using it to dig a tunnel would take at least 600 years. So, under Red's arrangement, the hammer was successfully delivered to Andy. The gears of fate also began to turn. However, for the next 2 years, Andy didn't have an easy life either. His face was always sad and covered in injuries. Although he never revealed the reason, everyone knew it was the masterpiece of the sisters in prison. They had desired Andy for a long time, and each time he resisted, he would be severely beaten. Until today, the factory roof outside the prison needed repair. Warden Norton decided to assign 12 prisoners. Through an under-the-table deal, at the price of 1 pack of cigarettes per person, Red helped his friends successfully secure spots. And what surprised Andy was that he also appeared on the list. While working, Andy overheard Captain Hadley's complaints. His brother had left him an inheritance after dying, but the huge taxes made him extremely frustrated. Hearing this, a banker like Andy quietly approached. "Hey, Captain, do you trust your wife?" "Oh, interesting. I mean, you don't admit it because she's not faithful to you." The captain, thinking he was being insulted, fell silent, wanting to push him off the roof. He was about to push Andy off. "If you trust her, you can definitely get the $35,000. "What did you say?" $35,000, every last cent. "You better not be messing with me. If you want to receive the whole amount, gift it to your wife." The tax department allows a one-time lifetime gift of up to $60,000 tax-free. The tax department doesn't collect a dime. Coupled with the fact that Andy used to be a banker, Captain Hadley decided to trust him for now. But Andy made a small request. After everything is successful, treat my colleagues to 3 beers each. So, on the day it succeeded, 12 prisoners sat on the roof bathed in the afternoon sun, enjoying the cold beers in their hands. And the one treating was the most notorious Captain Hadley in prison. We drank beer under the sun shining on our backs like free men, feeling like we were fixing our own roofs. We were like the lords of all creation. And Andy? He kept a strange smile on his face, watching us drink his beer. From then on, Andy was officially accepted by the prisoners. To show his gratitude, Red gave him a large pin-up poster. And this poster also became an indispensable part of Andy's grand plan. Today, the sisters came looking for Andy again. Andy still refused strongly as before. But because he resisted too fiercely, he received the worst beating yet, enough to be in the infirmary for a month. And the leader of the sisters also paid a heavy price for this. From that day on, the sisters no longer bothered Andy, and their leader would never walk again. Soon enough, Andy's talents were discovered by Warden Norton. He used the excuse of patrolling the cells to come to Andy's room, turn around, face the warden. After noticing the Bible in Andy's hand, the warden gladly quoted. At this moment, the warden noticed the poster on the wall. Regulations forbade posting it, but he decided to make an exception for Andy. Before leaving, Warden Norton returned the Bible to Andy, also quoting the moral saying from the book, "Salvation lies within." But he would never have guessed this Bible would eventually lead to his downfall. A few days later, somehow Andy was transferred by Warden Norton to work in the library. Not only did he not have to do manual labor, but he also had a lot of free time. Just as he was wondering why Warden Norton did this, a guard came looking for him. "I want to apply for a scholarship for my son." It turned out Warden Norton's real purpose was for Andy to serve as the prison's free financial advisor. Soon enough, Andy's financial services spread throughout Shawshank. More and more guards came to him for tax returns. Even Warden Norton was among them. At the busiest times, he even needed Red as an assistant. To enrich the daily lives of his fellow inmates, Andy also requested funding from Warden Norton to expand the library, but was still denied. There were only 3 circumstances where prison funds could be touched: building fences, or adding cells, and adding guards. Reluctantly, Andy had to write letters to the state senate to request funding, but ultimately, it was like throwing a stone into the sea. So Andy persisted, deciding to send 1 letter a week until they replied. Just like that, a year passed. Today, the librarian Brooks suddenly snapped. The man who was always gentle suddenly held a fellow inmate at knife point. It turned out he had been approved for parole yesterday, but he didn't want to leave the prison, so he wanted to commit an offense to extend his sentence. Fortunately, Andy's group passed by and persuaded him. Finally, Brooks put down the weapon, but his actions left Andy extremely puzzled. "Isn't being free a good thing?" Red explained. "He's just institutionalized." Institutionalized? He's been in prison for 50 years. 50 whole years. This is the only place he knows. In here, he's an important man, an educated man. But out there, he's nothing, just a prisoner with arthritis. Would be refused even if he wanted to borrow library books. "I'm telling you, these walls are funny. First you hate him, then you get used to him. Enough time passes, you get so you depend on him. That's institutionalized." The next day, Brooks released the little bird that had been with him for years, carrying confusion and bewilderment as he left the place he had lived for 50 years. Walking on the bustling streets, everything here filled him with fear. When he was young, he had only ever seen 1 car, but now they filled the streets. The parole board had provided accommodation and a packing job for him, but he was too old. Although he tried to work hard, he was still disliked by the store manager. His arthritis constantly flared up, but what tortured his soul the most was the loneliness. He often woke up at night, then was overwhelmed by a huge sense of loss. He didn't like this noisy world, and this world didn't need a useless old man either. So one day, he put on an old-fashioned suit. After carving a line onto the beam, he contentedly ended his life. He endured in a dark prison cell for 50 years, but only managed to survive in the free world for 3 days. Finally, Andy, who had persisted in writing letters for 6 years, got a response. The state senate sent $200 and a few boxes of old books, hoping Andy would stop there. But it seemed they had underestimated Andy. "From now on, I'll write 2 letters a week." While sorting the books, Andy found a record in a box. This gave him a bold idea. So he put the record on the player, locked the door of the broadcasting room, then turned on the PA system switch. Melodious singing echoed through every corner of Shawshank. The inmates stopped to listen. They quietly experienced the freedom and hope in the music. At this moment, the prison walls seemed to disappear. The prisoners' despair also vanished into thin air. And the price for all this was Andy being put in solitary confinement for 2 weeks. After Andy got out, people couldn't help asking him, was it really worth it for a song? But Andy said, there are some things prison can't confine. It's hope. Red disagreed with Andy's point of view. He told him about his 2 parole hearings. The first time was 10 years ago, acting like a child who made a mistake. Red's answer was sincere, careful, and reserved. He even swore to God he would never make a mistake again. But finally, 10 years later, Red faced his second parole hearing. Compared to the last time, he became calmer, more indifferent, but his eyes held much less desire for freedom. For your life sentence, you've been incarcerated here for 30 years. Not unexpectedly, what awaited Red was still rejection as before. 30 years of prison life and 2 failed parole applications had long since made Red lose heart. He advised Andy, face the reality before you. Hope is a dangerous thing. Hope can drive a man insane. It has no use here. You better just accept your fate. Some more time passed. The 2 letters Andy sent each week got a response. The state legislature understood that $200 couldn't get rid of him, so they decided to allocate $500 per year to Shawshank. Andy used this money to buy a large quantity of old books, building the best prison library in New England. At the same time, Warden Norton implemented the prison labor program. Thanks to this, he earned a large amount of dirty money through the huge amount of free labor. And naturally, the money laundering task fell onto Andy. Out of concern for his friend, Red advised him to still be careful. But Andy laughed and told him not to worry. It turned out he had used his expertise to launder money through methods like stocks and securities. Then, he transferred the money under the name of a person called Randall Stevens. And this was a person Andy fabricated using a loophole, someone who only existed on paper and documents. A few more years passed. A new batch of prisoners arrived at the prison. Among them was a young man named Tommy Williams. Thanks to his bright personality, he quickly integrated with the other inmates. During a chat, he learned the reason why Andy was imprisoned from Red. In an instant, it seemed something clicked. He sought out Andy, told him what he had heard while serving time in another prison. It was a guy who seemed crazy. He stood by the window boasting about his past exploits. The story he told exactly matched Andy's wrongful conviction case. Hearing news that could clear his name, Andy quickly became agitated. He went to Warden Norton, wanting to persuade him to reopen his case. But Warden Norton refused. Andy knew well the warden was afraid that after he left, he would reveal the money laundering. To avoid future trouble, Warden Norton called Tommy outside the prison. He wanted to test the truthfulness of his words. I need you to be sure. We need to be 100% certain to reopen the case. I need to know if what you told Andy is true. Yes, sir, it's all true. What Tommy said confirmed Warden Norton's fears. He put out his cigarette, looked up at the guard tower. Tommy fell in a pool of blood, stopped breathing. Just like that, an innocent young man was cruelly eliminated for self-interest, and the reason given for shooting him was suspicion of trying to escape. Learning about this, Andy was devastated, deciding not to work for Warden Norton anymore. But facing this situation, Warden Norton still had countless ways. Another month in solitary confinement. Another month passed. Andy was finally released from the solitary confinement room. Red advised him to accept reality. Fighting here never ended well. But Andy said he had been here for 19 years. If one day he got out, he would go to a place called Zawataneo, a place called the ocean with no memory. I want to live the rest of my life there, open a small hotel by the sea, buy an old boat, and fix it up like new, take guests out on the ocean. Red advised him to stop daydreaming. Anyway, a person always has to choose one of two: get busy living or get busy dying. Before leaving, Andy told Red, if one day you successfully get paroled, you must go to the hayfield north of Buxton. There's a stone wall there and a large oak tree. There's a piece of black volcanic rock under the tree. There's something I left for you under the rock. Andy's tone was like giving final instructions. This made Red couldn't help worrying. When he heard from another inmate that Andy had just gotten a rope from him, Red became even more anxious. He worried Andy would commit suicide like Brooks. A person's patience has limits. That night, outside the prison walls, thunder rumbled and lightning flashed. Red sat by his bed experiencing the longest night of his life. The next morning, Red looked towards Andy's cell, but he never appeared. A guard cursed as he went to check. The next second, his eyes widened in shock. At the same time, Warden Norton heard the alarm siren. Knowing Andy had disappeared from his cell, he angrily dragged Red out for questioning. But Red was confused and knew nothing about it. In a fit of rage, he picked up the rocks from the windowsill to vent his anger. This is a goddamn conspiracy. Everyone was involved, including her. A strange sound echoed. Warden Norton pulled the poster aside, and behind the poster was the door to freedom. After a comprehensive search, they only discovered a prison uniform and a worn-out rock hammer in the sewage pipe near the prison. It turned out, the first time he got the rock hammer 19 years ago, Andy originally wanted to carve his name on the wall, but suddenly chipped off a piece of the wall easily. Looking at the rock that crumbled in his hand, Andy had a bold idea. So, using the poster for cover, he began digging the path to salvation. During every morning walk in the yard, he quietly scattered the debris, just like that for 19 years. Until Tommy was killed, the last ray of hope vanished. Andy finally decided not to stay any longer. That night, first he swapped Warden Norton's ledger books, also casually taking a pair of the warden's leather shoes. When everyone was fast asleep, he stuffed all the important items into a bag. Then, Andy secured his belongings, crawled into the long, narrow tunnel, and climbed down the pipe. Thanks to the thunder masking the sound, Andy repeatedly used a rock to hit the rusted sewage pipe. After many attempts, he finally created a hole in the sewer pipe. Andy struggled to crawl through the foul-smelling sewer pipe, crawling and vomiting for 500 meters. After crawling out of the pipe, he struggled to take off his shirt, reached out to embrace the freedom he had lost for so long. The heavy rain washed away the filth from his body, also symbolizing his new life from now on. A few days later, a person named Randall Stevens appeared at various banks. Previously, he only existed on paper and documents, but now had become a real person. Andy not only had all the documents to prove his identity, but even the signature was perfect. He withdrew all the assets from the accounts. Before leaving, he also mailed the evidence of Warden Norton's and Captain Hadley's crimes to the newspaper office. The next morning, the Shawshank scandal made the front page of the newspapers. Warden Norton hurriedly opened the safe to destroy the incriminating evidence, but suddenly found only a Bible inside. Memories from many years ago flooded his mind. That day, he himself had handed the Bible back to Andy. He only remembered the content in the Bible, but forgot its weight. Soon enough, numerous police officers arrived at Shawshank. They took Captain Hadley away. Knowing the situation was irreversible, Norton turned the gun on himself. Some more time passed. Red received a postcard Andy sent. This proved he was free, heading towards the dreamland. Red was genuinely happy for his old friend from the bottom of his heart, and Andy's legendary story continued to circulate within the prison. But every time he was mentioned, Red always felt a hint of loss in his heart. Every evening, he remembered his long-unseen old friend. But he understood one thing. Some birds aren't meant to be caged. Their feathers are too bright with the light of freedom. Just like that, many years passed. In the 40th year of Red's sentence, he faced his third parole hearing. It was a different interviewer, but still asking similar mundane questions. Have you been rehabilitated? Rehabilitated? Let me see. I have no idea what that word means. Ultimately, what do you want to know? Do I regret the crime I committed? Well, do you? Not a day goes by I don't feel regret. Not because I'm in here, or because you think I should be. I look back on the way I was then, a young, stupid kid who committed a terrible crime. I want to talk to him. I want to try and talk some sense to him, tell him the way things are. But I can't. That kid's long gone, and this old man is all that's left. Perhaps his sincere confession moved the interviewer. Perhaps he was too old to reoffend. Finally, he got the long-awaited stamp of approval. Reaching the heavy prison gate, he nodded goodbye to the guards he'd known for years. 40 years passed in the blink of an eye. The child who once made a mistake was now old. He looked bitterly at the high walls that had imprisoned him for more than half his life. At this moment, no one knew what he was thinking. He took the same bus as Brooks, saw the same scenery Brooks had seen, went to the room Brooks had stayed in. The name on the beam was still clear. 40 years of prison life had already institutionalized him like Brooks. He worked the same job as Brooks. Every time he wanted to go to the bathroom, he raised his hand to report to the store manager out of habit. Otherwise, couldn't piss a drop. He also thought about violating parole to return to prison, but finally reason brought him back to his senses. He decided to fulfill his promise to Andy. Before leaving, he also carved his name on the beam as a way to remember his old friend. Reaching the place Andy had mentioned, Red found what Andy had left for him under the large oak tree. It was some money and a letter. Dear Red, if you're reading this letter, you've probably been released. If you've come this far, maybe you can go a little further. You remember the place, right? Zawadaneo. I need someone to work with me. I'm waiting for you. The plan is ready. Remember, Red, hope is a good thing, maybe the best of things. And no good thing ever dies. I hope this letter finds you, and finds you well. The words resonated deeply, enough to save a weary soul. Red decided to be bold for once. He violated his parole, crossed the border following the instructions in the letter. The wind of freedom brushed against his face, a feeling he had never had before. A few days later, Red arrived at a sea called No Memory. Clear blue sky, deep blue sea, gentle sea breeze. On a smooth sandy beach, two long-separated old friends finally met again. Andy Dufresne, despite being wrongfully convicted and living in the harsh environment of Shawshank prison, never gave up hope. He believed in the future and always sought ways to escape captivity. Andy not only sought to escape Shawshank prison, but also freed his soul from the trauma and suffering of the past. The Shawshank Redemption is not just a film about life in prison, but also a story about the strength of the human spirit. It encourages us to believe in hope, persevere, and always fight for the good things in life. Today's story ends here. Thank you for watching the film summary. What do you think of this movie? Please comment below.